we are on the move, boy. Some of you are going to get moved a lot further than you thought you were. You sure will. Running around here not believing in each other, but letting somebody else come in and tell you that, you're different. You don't have to worry about certain stuff, You're different. You're not like us. Man, I'll tell you what. 1952, if you were in Mississippi, whether you were brown or yellow, red, black, well, let me just say this. If you were not white in 1952 and you were in south of the Mason-Dixon line, you were a family. Whether you knew each other's name, whether you knew each other's shoe size, if you were not white, it was assumed that you were all in the same family of non-whites, and that meant you took the door that the company took. Company being non-white company took the back door, and they were allowed to be happy as long as they took the back door and happily took their little spankings and mistreatments and lack of accesses and, still come fight the war, still take your butt to work and, keep America strong and make it great. That's why they're trying to so-called get it great again, because we were making it great then. But you made it great then, and you took your butt home to the back door, and you stayed out of the front yard so nobody could see you. And it was much easier on the conscience of people who were obviously superior, not just in their own mind, but in the policies that they were able to affect on the planet. One of the greatest marketing jobs of all time, that white people are superior to everyone else on the planet. Great marketing job. Almost as good as the con job that we see. Don't get mad at me. There's a world of people who love con, who love the idea of being convinced of something other than, the obvious. I have to salute, anybody that can tell you one thing while you are in the middle of looking at something else that belies exactly what that person is saying. They are either tremendously charismatic or you're tremendously stupid. And I cannot say that all of America or half of America is tremendously stupid. I just cannot bring myself to say that. I have to salute Donald Trump and his ability to fool you, to cajole you, to convince you that your senses, my senses, are off, that he's absolutely right. Well, I think over a short period of time, we're going to find enough people that are going to be, there's people who are not going to continue to drink the Kool-Aid, and some of them that are drinking it are not going to continue to lose their breath. What I'm talking about is unrest. I'm talking about the follow-up for anarchy. When our president says that he doesn't have to follow the law, and he doesn't say that, he just does it, he makes it acceptable for other people to do it. Other people like who? Well, like his president, like his vice president, like his cabinet people, like his defense people. They follow, the shadow follows the body, and the body is out there on the ridiculous. And so we've got a shadow world of ridiculous things taking place. We'll stand strong. We'll be okay, I believe, because I do believe in the good sense of America's people. I think Americans are smart. I think we are, like most folk, like to be discovered, and, Trump has promised to make everyone his apprentice. Not the position that I want. But some people want it, and I have to respect you for wanting it. And I will respect you just as much tomorrow morning after I've seen you spend the night with him, many nights with him. I will respect you when you turn around, so you're welcome to come home. I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to talk crazy about you. I'm not going to, divorce you later. I'll be glad to have you come home. I'll be very glad to see you come to your senses and reject his. And I don't mean you got to do anything crazy to him. Just stop letting him do these crazy things to you. So that's my message for the day. Well, that's part of the message for the day. The other message is going to come from my good friend, Mr. Don Smith. He's our housing advocate. He is a member, co-chair of the Western Region Steering Committee that has to do with, Don, Don, how are you, first of all?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
God is great. I'm extremely grateful. Glad to be able to suck up all of this oxygen, though it's not free like it used to be. we have to strain it now because we're polluting it so well. Not to change the subject, but since I brought up pollution, you know, it's a shame, man. They're finding little particles of plastic in our system, small enough to go into the brain, and it's coming off the insides of our plastic cups and it's amazing. It's amazing that we are doing these things to ourselves. And not only do we kill ourselves like that, we treat ourselves bad, each other bad. We just sometimes don't want to give it up to each other, but thank goodness there's people like you, Miss Erica, what's her last name?
Lewis Huntley.
Erica Lewis Huntley. She's your co-chair with your Western Region Steering Committee. Tell us about the steering committee. Tell us what you guys are concerned about. What is your mission? What is your goal? I've got a good idea, but I'd like for people out here to have a better idea as we go forward and solve a couple of the world's problems this morning.
Okay. Well, the West Valley Regional Steering Committee is part of the San Bernardino Continuum of Care, which is charged with developing a coordinated, strategic approach to addressing homelessness and our ongoing housing crisis.
Continuum of care.
Continuum of care. The concept is through public-private partnerships, we have a well-structured approach to addressing challenges with homelessness and housing insecurity in an effective and efficient way, with the ultimate goal of making homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. And so in our space, the West Valley Regional Steering
Rare, brief, and
non-reoccurring.
So that means we would like to have, we understand that if there's a fire, somebody's going to be homeless. We understand that if there's an earthquake, there's going to be somebody homeless. But we don't want to over-understand the idea that people can't afford housing, can't find housing, and are consistently without housing, and same people all the time, and a high number of people all the time, which suggests that we've got a level that we consider not acceptable, but expectable. Not respectable, but we could expect a certain number of people to be without housing for a short period of time. What are those what would be acceptable, or better than that, maybe what is the situation we're in numbers-wise?
The ideal objective would be that everybody has a housing option, and when one finds themselves in a situation where they don't have a housing option, we have a system in place that helps address that quickly and gets people back on track in an efficient, effective way. I mean, that's the ideal.
The house catches on fire, we see it on the news, your house catches on fire, you burn out, and there comes the Red Cross. There's the Salvation Army. There's United Way. Or somebody that is able to provide that short-term help that those people need.
There's that, but it's
a
little deeper than that, because we're talking about, right now we have a situation where people find themselves housing insecure or chronically homeless. We have hundreds of people in our community
living under bridges
who regularly live homeless day to day. That is their living existence. And so part of the goal is, how do we create a structure where first we can get people out of homelessness and into stable environment,
a place to spend the night, have shelter. call it home, place to put their clothes, a place to keep their food fresh, housing, home.
But uh, ultimately moved into a stabilized housing environment that is their own. I mean, that's the ultimate. Every human being, and certainly within a country like America,
Brags about being civilized.
everyone should have a place where they can call their own, where they can keep their stuff, where they have a roof over their head, they have
Right.
a bed to sleep on, a place to store and prepare food, a place to address, go to the bathroom and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Everybody deserves at least that at a minimum level. And right now, we don't have in place a structure that ensures that that happens. So how do we, one, identify people who are consistently struggling with housing insecurity and create housing environments that they can obtain and maintain a stable presence. But then beyond that deep problem of those dealing with chronically homeless, we need a system in place where people don't fall through the cracks. So if for whatever circumstance you lose your housing, that doesn't then become a cycle of homelessness where you're going to consistently be housing insecure. When one loses their housing for whatever reason, that one paycheck away, there should be a system in place where they can stabilize and then move into a new housing environment within a short period of time, and a structure for that to happen.
Let me let a couple of people go who probably don't want to finish the show. We started off, we have a very strong premise here. One, that everybody not only deserves housing, but that everybody believes that everybody deserves housing. I know from talking to people on the way to work and on the way home from work and sitting around not working, that there's some people who don't feel that everyone deserves housing because everybody's not working as hard as they are to earn and have housing. And if they did, they would have housing, except for the obvious emergencies that we come up and see that occur. There are some people who are not kind or caring or compassionate and think that, and so folks, if you're concerned that we're going to continue talking about compassion and caring and all of that and you don't want to hear it, you can go home.
Well, no, let me say this.
Well, I mean,
it doesn't have to just be about compassion. It just is common sense. We don't want people sleeping on our streets, sleeping in our parks, sleeping in their cars.
So they don't really have to be compassionate to
It doesn't have to be compassionate. It can be, we don't want folks doing that. But if we don't want that, they have to have a place to go.
Oh, hey, come back. Don't leave. I thought it was going to be okay. So we can actually tell people who really don't give a rat's tail about what happens to other people a reason to care about what happens to other people, not because of what's happening to other people, but because of what's happening to the other people, how it affects
To your
them.
quality of life.
Yes.
Your quality of
Okay.
life in your community is impacted by the
So
fact
you
that
don't
you got
really
people
have to
sleeping on your streets.
care about those people that are unfortunately sleeping under the bridge. If you simply care enough about they're in your way, you should sit down and listen, because we're going to help figure out and talk about ways to get them out of your way.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And if your concern is economic, if you're concerned about the economics of your community,
Well,
that's
everybody should be
impacted
concerned
by
about that. Yeah.
by people living on your streets,
we're
then
getting enthused because people are getting kicked out of jobs in order to become more efficient. So
but it costs us less for people to have a stable place to live than it costs us to have to react to the situations that occur for people that are living on our streets or need emergency responses and other help through the streets. It costs way less if we just made sure that they had a stable place to live.
are you suggesting that maybe some of the billions of dollars that we've heard people have, that we as taxpayers have spent in California to help house people temporarily, that maybe if we were to somehow put that money in permanent housing, we would. But anyway,
100%.
Really?
100%. We would save significantly more money providing people with permanent stable housing than providing them with temporary housing.
there was a time, and I remember when I was well, I don't remember because I was too young, but when I was first born, my parents moved into a state-of-the-art housing project in Mississippi where the people who were poor and as well as the people who were doctors and all, where they all lived in it. But it was a housing project. And I think that concept kind of evolved over to where we say, oh, the projects now, and it's a place where it's not necessarily the state of the art, and it's a place where we kind of ship people who don't have resources. Solution-wise and activity-wise, are cities and counties still building housing, creating housing? Is the federal government still doing that?
No.
Or, no, we don't.
No.
there's-
They're investing in housing being built, but most
They don't manage
government doesn't take responsibility for housing like was tried in the 70s and the 80s with the public housing concept. That's virtually disappeared. Now
what's
what they do
replaced
is
that?
they fund affordable housing projects through mostly low-income tax credit approach, which basically is focused on making it pencil out for developers to build housing that they can charge less rent at. And they get tax credits for that and all of that. It's not consumer focused. It's not focused on how do we make housing affordable for consumers. It's focused on how do we make it pencil out for developers.
To
so
build
there's
the
still
house.
there's no
Well, now, wait a
public
minute.
entity that's taking responsibility for creating housing that is run and operated in a way that's focused on the
So-
public good.
So we are taking the profit at the development level as opposed to looking at the profit that we would create as a nation by giving people the comfort of housing and the security that goes along with it that would allow them to then function well economically and actually bring more money into the
You hit the
system.
nail on the head, brother. You hit
Oh,
the
okay,
nail
okay.
on the head
Very
there.
good.
Because, again, if we were looking at doing it smart, if we were focused on what makes the best economic sense for us
Long term.
as a society, long term, and for all of our quality of life, we would make sure that people had stable housing they could afford. If you're paying 30% or less of your income on housing, you're spending that extra income in your communities,
Okay.
helping build up the economy. Renters spend trillions of dollars to prop up local communities. I think in the Riverside, San Bernardino metropolitan area, it was somewhere along $30 trillion expended by renters within their communities, building up local economies.
Over a set
Right.
period of time.
And so
Not
when-
annually. I mean, we're not looking at trillions of dollars being spent annually by
Yes,
consumers.
annually by consumers who are renters, people who are renters. The
in-
money they're spending in their local communities, which local communities make their money on sales taxes in their communities. They
Okay.
don't make money off of property taxes. That goes to the state.
Okay.
And then they divvy it up. Local cities make money off the sales taxes being spent in their communities. And so when their residents live there and are paying a comfortable amount toward housing, 30% or less is the standard. The rest of that money is going into the community. You know, especially when we're talking about low-income people. If you have a little extra money in your pocket, you're not taking fancy trips. You're buying groceries and diapers and the mechanic in town. You're
See,
spending money locally.
you use the word extra. So if we say extra, usually we mean this is something that I could
Disposable.
use or not use, and I'd still be okay. So what you're talking about isn't really extra money. It's money that I don't have to use for this part of survival I can use for a
basic
different
standard of living.
Yeah, okay. So I
Absolutely.
can actually buy some socks to go along with the shoes that I have to wear.
Absolutely.
And then I can buy some new underwear and maybe get the
I
kids
can
some
afford
clothes
to
and
take my family out to a local restaurant once a month.
Okay,
You
okay,
know?
okay.
But what's happening now is the opposite. People are severely housing cost burdened, and that's where you're spending more than 50% of your income on housing cost. And at the extremely low income level, people who are 30% or low area median income, sorry to use all of these technical terms, they are here just in our metropolitan region, 84% of people at 30% below AMI are severely cost burdened, meaning they're spending more than 50% of their income on rent.
Can
An
we put some
average
real
is
numbers with that?
68% of their income on rent in average. And so,
What are those real numbers? Am I
well,
pushing
let's
you
say,
too hard?
no. Well, let's say your income is $1,000 a month, and you're
Now
spending.
that classifies as really poor, really rich.
That would definitely put you in the extremely low income category.
Okay.
That would poverty level. But I'm just using 1,000 as an easy way to do the numbers. So say 68% of that is going just toward your rent. $680 is going toward your rent.
Ooh, that's not bad.
Well, but then you've got to live the rest of the month off of that $320, which you got to buy your groceries, you
I
got to
just
pay
want
your
to know where that
gas, you got to get to
$600
work.
rent is.
Well, no, you can't get it. I'm
Oh,
just
oh,
using.
okay,
You
okay.
told me to use numbers, so I'm just using some numbers.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't exist.
Okay.
There is nowhere
But
in the
yet-
country, and this isn't hyperbole. This is the data shows it. There is nowhere in the country, no zip code in the country, where someone living off of Social Security income, which nationwide is average 967, here in California is about 1,200. But there's nowhere where you can go and rent a place to live that's not subsidized with a $1,200 a month income.
Okay.
Average
So
rents-
we should have a lot of. I mean, what you're saying should have a lot of popular support behind it because there's so many people in the situation that requires its support.
keeps growing and growing. The fastest growing population amongst those who are becoming homeless or severely housing insecure are older adults. And in our last census count, we don't have the numbers from the one we just did, but from last year here in San Bernardino County, 50% of the people identified as homeless were 45 and older, and that just keeps going up. So that veered off the rent thing, though. So, again, if you're paying 68% of your income on rent, and that only leaves that 32% to cover everything else, you're not spending that money in town. But say that same person was only spending $300 on rent. That extra money, again, they're not going to Europe. They can actually buy their medications.
They're not going to Compton.
They're not going, okay, but they're buying medication. They're able to get gas to get to work.
Right.
They're able. I talk about seniors, but if you live on minimum wage,
That's right.
you're in that same category. There's nowhere you can rent in California on a minimum wage income where you're not spending more than 50% of your income on rent, if you can find something with that income. And so nobody benefits from that. Nobody benefits from that because the problem just keeps getting worse. More and more people need more and more help through our social service system. And you want people to be able to take care of themselves. You want your quality of life up here to be good. You need the people who are serving you,
You
at
cannot
your
sit
restaurants,
at the
who are
table.
working at your schools,
That's right.
who are cleaning your buildings, who are doing your lawns, and we need all these people to have a stable place to live and at a comfortable, affordable level. So then they're spending their money back in the community, and everybody thrives.
That's right.
rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, we've lost that concept in America, but it's the common sense that
Well, now
if my neighbor's doing well, then I'm doing well. If the person who is serving me at my restaurant, or taking care of my kids, or taking care of my parents, my older parents,
lost
if
that
they're doing
concept.
well, then we all do well.
You're saying we lost that concept. I think when we really look at it, I'm wondering, when did we actually have that concept? I know that we've set some policies that would appear to say that we are starting to care and understand that people are our most important product, but somehow we keep flipping the switch and thinking that no, the only people that are our most important product are the ones that are super wealthy, because everything seems to go in that direction. We have a constant statement that says, well, we shouldn't be so class conscious. We shouldn't be trying to pit, the upper class against the lower class, or the middle class, except we don't have a middle class anymore. We have an upper class that only consists of less than 1% of the population, and we have then the rest of us. And that's just not a good mix for peace and harmony, and it seems to be more of a mix that's constantly leading to confusion, chaos, and to some extent internal warfare.
But here's what's changed, because yes, we've always had that caste system in America, but for decades we gave at least the facade, I'd say even more than facade, but the actual, we gave credence to the notion that we could be better. And as long as it was happening incrementally, that's okay. And so, we can take steps toward that greater America that we all want to see. Yeah, we all believe in that. Yeah, let's keep going there. But that flipped in the last decade. Well, even more, since Obama was first elected.
We saw what happened to the Jewish people in Germany. The horror of that made us kind of wake up and say, as a people across the planet, that we should care more. Yeah. And we were ending the colonialism that was the sucking and stealing of resources from poor countries, and keeping countries poor. They're rich enough to steal from, but they're not rich enough to invest in. And that was more of a selfish attitude than it was a real economic statement. How we get to and maintain a position of caring and having compassion for each other, because there are people on the planet who care, and I'd say we're running close to 50-50. Those people who have been able to figure out that it's important to care, and those people who've been fooled into thinking that it's not beneficial to care. And as they look at what they consider to be the role models, the rich and the wealthy, and the selfish of the rich and wealthy, because there are some rich and wealthy who realize that they wouldn't be that way were it not for the help and support and sacrifices of others, and are trying to kind of spread their wealth.
Absolutely, but again, it doesn't just have to be about care and compassion. It can be appealing to people's self-interest.
Right.
And what's happened is that the upper elite, the oligarchical order that we're dealing with now, has convinced people that you have to choose sides, that the other guy's your enemy, that their advancement takes away from you something that belongs to you, that's your birthright. And I won't go to who I'm talking about, but you have a birthright that all of these other people are trying to take from you. And so that's how they keep it divided and prevent us from helping everybody see it's in all of our self-interest that America works for everyone. Because when it works for everyone, we all win.
That's right.
But the oligarchical order keeps the divide and conquer down, prevents people from realizing that my self-interests are better aligned with all of us here than with the oligarchical order up here. And that's where we've gone a dark turn from the last several decades where the oligarchical order has truly convinced folks that you got to be on one team or the other because the other side is trying to take what's yours.
You're making me wonder that in that 1%, if that 1% of super rich people is a diverse group of people, or are they 90% all one ethnic group? And as I think about it, they probably are fairly mixed, because I look at some people who are obviously not white, who have some resources, and as if I close my eyes, they sound like they're super rich white people, as opposed to super rich minorities or super rich Arabs or super rich Africans or super rich non-white people. And I'm not one to just blame white people
Right.
for what's going on. I am one to say that there's some selfish rich people
Amen
who
to that.
are changing, who are overcharging, who are making much more than they should make. And as I say that, they're taking much more than they should take.
Worldwide, the 1% is definitely diverse. And in part because they rely on each other. If you make it to that echelon, then you're going to get the support. They don't care what color you
Well,
are.
you can buy
as
it,
long your
right.
money's green.
Right.
That's ultimately what drives the 1% is the money's green. So I don't care what you look like.
So with what you're saying, that there are some folk who will be able to understand that there are economic benefits as well as moral benefits to caring about what happens to homeless people and people who are not economically solid.
Economic and quality of life benefits
Right.
that you benefit from these challenges being addressed, that we all do better when we all do better.
Let's give some examples of that. I know that with your steering committee, you guys meet regular, and you don't just talk about problems, you also share some positive stories, some best practices, some things that are apparently working. You want to share some of those things so that we don't get people jumping off of bridges and stuff. That's not my goal. I want you to understand that despite the opposition, despite the weights against us, that it does pay to resist. They'll tell you that if you want to build muscle in your body, resistance work is the deal. You don't have to have weights. You can lean against the wall. You can lean against the floor. You can press yourself. How do we resist this desire, this push to stay selfish and be the only? How do we? What are some of the best practices that we've seen for people to invest in others, invest in situations that are going to benefit others, and somehow still benefit themselves? How's that work? Well, for one thing,
packed in there. Yeah.
well, there is, but we also, let's go back to housing. How instead of providing housing directly by the government creates incentives for developers so that developers can build the houses and still make a profit, and it provides housing. Now that's a decent circle, and I'm sure that when you use the word profit, some people are going to argue, well, that ain't enough or that's too much. But that's
Yeah, and so that the whole current affordable housing structure we have built now is designed for that, where government funding can be provided to developers to build housing that is still profitable. Unfortunately, the housing industry right now is so out of whack that even that's not working anymore. It worked for a while. We need a new model there. But there are projects where funding is being invested to create a true affordability where people are paying no more than 30% of their income for their housing space. There are new innovative approaches being taken. One that I'm involved in is a cooperative living approach we've spent most of our lives living in shared housing space, but we've created this culture now where people feel like if they're sharing space that it's undignified, or that I deserve more than that. But the reality is, shared living is how we live most of our lives.
That's right.
And 75% of adults in America live in some type of shared
Listen,
housing
we
with
share
somebody else.
we share the road, we share the sidewalks,
Right.
we share the air, we share everything that we all need. So sharing,
Right. So there's a movement right now to promote using single-family homes where you might have a 4-bedroom home with 4 unrelated adults sharing the space, not sharing a bedroom. So we're not talking about. There are lots of people who are taking advantage of folks out there who have these houses where they rent a 10 by 10 to 2 or 3 unrelated adults who don't know each other, and they're all spending $1,000 each to
stay in the same
they're
bedroom.
being
Yeah.
taken advantage of. So that's
Right.
not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Golden Girls model, where adults just for economies of scale, they have their own bedroom, they're paying their share of the rent, they share common space,
Right.
they live cooperatively together. And so using that as a way to create more affordable options for people right now, building housing more like that. We used to, single room occupancy used to be how a whole lot of Americans lived for decades in this country, and then we stopped doing that because it wasn't as, for whatever reason, it
didn't display our wealth.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But having space where you have your own room, maybe your own bathroom, maybe it's a common bathroom down the hall, maybe a common kitchen that's being shared, but you have your own space sharing common spaces with others, like dormitories.
Right, right.
That kind of
Roommates.
thing.
You're talking about
Yes.
people being
so
roommates.
creating
Housemates.
housing, creating space where people can naturally spend less money on their housing situation, rather than building some fancy apartment building and charging $3,500 for a 2-bedroom, which is insanity.
Unless you're in
but
Los
that's-
Angeles.
No, we're doing that in
That's what I'm saying. It's insane.
Ontario,
It's
and
insane unless you're
everywhere else. I
in
mean,
LA,
it's-
where people have just lost homes. 40,000 people
Oh
without
my
a place
God!
to stay.
It's criminal.
Is there
To be
a
honest, it's
good
criminal.
model taking place now that you could point to and say with pride that, well, despite everything else that's going on, we've got something here in San Bernardino County that appears to be equitable, that appears to be fair, and obviously we don't have anything like enough of them, but there is one that we can point to that seems to be fair. Oh man, you're taking too long.
I know,
I don't know.
but-
Maybe we need to have a couple of commercials here.
Give me a minute to
No,
think about that.
no, and that's the shame of it, because we have programs, that are supposed to be working, and I speak to you about the ADU, additional or alternative dwelling site, but where people can build in their backyard.
Accessory dwelling units.
What do they call it?
Accessory dwelling units.
Accessory dwelling. Make it even hard to remember. Why not just plain additional? But anyway, the idea being that you can build. Now, that suggests that maybe housing codes in the various cities may be able to be loosened up to allow for more housing to be built. Is that an area that we could look at?
We can and have.
And then
There,
there's a
there
tiny-
have been a lot of regulatory changes making it easier to build alternative housing. ADUs is one example that you cited, but actually the laws that support ADUs also are connected to laws that were recently set up by the Newsom administration, where you, by right, could build more units on a single lot. There are guidelines and stuff for that, but the state made it so that local communities couldn't block that kind of development, and that's all about using infill space. One
So
of
we
our
have
best
some
moves
state
for
laws
creating affordable housing is to build up, not
out.
out. And so, there's certainly concerns, and particularly in California, where we're all about space. My wealth is displayed by all the space that I have.
Well,
And this is
not only that, there was a definite move into Southern California to get rid of things that reduce the effects of space. We used to have train systems throughout Southern California so that people could get wherever they wanted, but we decided that the automobile was going to be our queen and god, and as a result, we spread things out with the idea that we're going to support the automobile industry, which, it built jobs, made factories take place, but now
Right,
we're in
right.
another kind of circumstance where we need to build up. We find that around train stations, I know in Los Angeles and around train stations, they're building up.
Yes, yes.
They're building little islands around the train stations that can make it to where you don't really care where the train station is, because you've built a little community around the train
Yes.
station that'll be economically different from the area that it's dropped in.
There are billions being invested
Yes.
in that, and so we are seeing more of that happen. Look forward to seeing more of that happen in San Bernardino County. You're asking for a good example of that, and I know there's opportunities to do that, particularly in Rancho Cucamonga. That's part of their plan, is they're building that. Well, if the
The new
Trump
train.
administration doesn't kill it, but the new train, the
Yeah.
Vegas train, they're building a whole commercial and housing structure around that, and part of that includes money that's being invested in building housing in transit-oriented districts.
Well, we could look at the Old West. We remember in the Old West, half the cowboy movies we watched were based on the fact that the railroad is coming through, and there's somebody in the area buying up all of the land and chasing people away because the railroad's coming through, and I want to be sure I've got, on the right of way. The railroad will create community. Now, we are in the midst of building a railroad from Rancho Cucamonga to Las Vegas. And it's going to cross a lot of places where there are no people at this point. But as the railroad is getting built, there'll be a reason to stop in places and gather people in places that they haven't been gathered before. So as we look at housing and ability to support the people who could live in that housing, that remote area, because there's going to be remote jobs there, are we talking with them? Does that look like something that's going to help create housing as we go?
That's going to happen up in the
High desert.
Hesperia area,
Yeah.
where there's going to be
Well, we're talking
stations
about,
there,
we've
so
got
there's a
all of
whole
this,
infrastructure
all the
being built around
California that nobody lives in. And the reason nobody lives in the area is because, I don't want to live out in the middle of a place where there's no job. I got to drive 100 miles to get to
And
work.
there's no infrastructure or
Right,
anything.
right.
Building out is not going to impact any of this. We have to build up. It's called value per acre. We get a whole lot more out of building up and doing it smartly and doing it effectively. There's a whole movement around middle income housing or middle housing that's focused on how, in between the large apartment buildings and single family homes, there's this type of
Buffer
housing
zone.
that you build up that hopefully is going to address some of the needs of the middle and lower income.
When you guys have your
folks.
steering committee meetings, are you having developers come in and talk to you at all? Or are we pretty much having the social doctors come in and analyze the patient that's not in the room and the resources that are not necessarily in the room?
We kind of touched there. We have had featured discussions that involve talks of developers. I try to do that at least once a year. It's not major part of the focus, but definitely top of mind. And part of what I do with these meetings is just help educate advocates and community stakeholders about the challenges we're facing. You know, a lot of people, they see homelessness, and we've made sure that it's been defined as, there's these outliers of people who have problems, and so
Vagrants.
there should be a social service system.
We call them everything but.
Well, and people with
Fellow
behavioral health and
citizens.
people with substance
Yeah.
abuse, and there's plenty of that. But we define the problem there so that we don't have to look at the bigger picture problem. But the reality is, if people understood that there's a big segment of our population that can't afford a stable place to live, that the number one reason 90% of people who experience homelessness will tell you that it's because they can't get a place to live. All those other issues aside that may put somebody in that situation, the bottom line is it's economically infeasible. And if people understand that and recognize that how smart it would be if we just created a level of housing where everybody at whatever economic level had an option.
Okay, so we have to come up with
We'd
the way to.
address this
I think it's like you're saying, if we can demonstrate that there's an economic benefit, that people will move in that direction if they haven't been able to move based on their moral attitude.
That's right.
Okay, so based on that, what would you say to the 1,000 people who've got room in their backyard to do an additional dwelling? What's the benefit to that person?
Well, a number of things. One is we talk about our housing crisis and the folks who can't afford a stable place to live. For property owners, that starts right at home.
That's an opportunity.
You got your kid coming out of college that, even if they get a good entry-level job, they can't afford the rent in our home community. That's just a fact. So they're staying at home.
Okay.
Why not create a place where they could start off their rental history and life form in your backyard in a nice stable home?
There's a
and
way
then
to
there's
expand.
at the other end, we got aging parents who, again, can't afford to stay where they are, or can't afford a stable place to live on their own. They used to call them granny flats. You start building granny flats so that your aging parents have a place to live.
So
and
expanding your present dwelling, whether it be adding a separate dwelling in the backyard or adding to the existing dwelling and creating more space, you have the opportunity to have family live there that's living there anyway.
Who otherwise would
be out
struggling
looking.
with finding a place to live in the community.
And so since they would be struggling to find a place, they probably would have some income to help pay for the place.
Absolutely.
So instead of sending your child out somewhere where they're going to have to pay $2,000-3,000 a month, you're going to be in a situation where maybe they can pay you $1,500 a month, be ahead of the game, and that $1,500
Start saving some money so they can buy something someday.
It's covering your expense quite well.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's just the starting baseline. And then if you want to expand that, maybe you need a place for a nanny on your property.
So if we're able to,
you want to help out somebody who works at your local elementary school.
But the
by
idea,
providing them a stable place to live. That
basic
they can
idea
rent from.
is you can make some money by expanding your house or building a property in the back of your property. So if we were to,
although hopefully the objective wouldn't be about making money,
well, no,
but yes,
no,
you can do it in a way where
it's about saving money.
Yes, where
Okay,
it can be profitable.
Yeah.
But the objective is to at least, if you at least cover your cost and make a little money on top of that,
Well,
great.
at the
Not
same
trying
time-
to
at the same
get
time,
wealthy by
we're
doing
talking
it.
about developers having federal support to go out and actually create a profit. So let's not chase people away from the idea of making a profit in their backyard, because we can say, well, there's not a lot of privacy in the back. We can show you how to landscape your property so that you've got the backyard in a private setting. And because
Build
of the
that
law
apartment
now,
over your garage.
right, and so you're saying you can improve your property in a way that will create housing, either for family or for non-family, and in some cases get government subsidies for the people that are going to rent the property.
And make a reasonable rate of return
Right.
along the way.
And because our system and policies now are moving toward renters and people renting, maybe one of the things that we may want to do is encourage people to take advantage of remodeling and adding on to their existing properties. And part of that may be to have, is we're able to subsidize developers, maybe we can figure out how to subsidize the people in the loan business. I don't know, but there's possibilities.
Absolutely.
We're not looking at a situation that cannot be improved.
Correct.
It can be improved if we, I guess, like
If
we
that's
said,
our goal.
bite off a little bit more than we can chew and chew. Well, it's not going to be everybody's goal, but all it needs to be is one or two people's goal and everybody else's solution, right? And so we can figure this stuff out. I know this is on the quickest hour on radio, Don. I appreciate you coming in and sharing with us. I don't know if we solved any problem, but we certainly opened up the cellar door to some problem solving. I think if we take this one thing today and say, improve your property, making room for profit or convenience, you will be able to help the situation.
That's
And
certainly one way to help.
That's the beginning. We're
And,
gonna-
and if you own property and you're willing to be a social impact investor and rent, help us with creating shared housing space for folks, we need you too. If you're a property owner,
we need you.
yes.
We need you. If you hate the idea, we can figure something out for you. The idea being that if you've got property, you've got a resource. If you've got resources, we should be able to figure out a way for you to share that resource, benefit from that resource.
And we've got
allow others
nonprofit
to do that.
organizations that'll come help you manage that, where you can make your profit and they'll take care of all of the mess.
Don, we're going to continue this. I promise you. This is Empire Talks Back. I'm Wallace Allen. Don Smith, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you, sir.
appreciate your organization, and we appreciate them for sharing you with us. This is Empire Talks Back, and the mood master, you've been in there setting the mood, my brother. Thank you, Anthony. Great job today, Mark. Okay, we'll see you next week under two circumstances. One, if the good Lord's willing. Two, if the creek don't rise. God bless you. Thank you for your time. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind.
On Route 66.
NBC News